You're listening to the Vint Wine Podcast, where you'll hear interviews and stories from around the wine world. From writers and critics to winemakers and sommeliers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping wine culture. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Vint Wine Podcast. I am your host, Billy Galenko, and we are here with a very special episode for you today. We have a unique guest who is not a winemaker, not a critic, not a wine writer, but a wine map maker. We have Steve DeLong from DeLongWine.com on to talk about his maps. He was actually recommended by Charles Curtis, a past guest of ours, who's a master of wine and working on a project with Steve. I went and checked out Steve's maps once Charles mentioned the project that they were working on, and I thought his maps were absolutely gorgeous, and I asked Charles if he could please connect us. We had a great conversation. I am very much a map nerd, and he also just fell into map making from a passion. He had an architecture background and has been making these beautiful maps for years and years now. So I highly recommend everybody go check out the maps at DeLongWine.com. But I'm also excited to share that I will be doing a giveaway of one of Steve's maps this week. Steve was kind enough to send me a ton of maps, more than I had expected. So I have one of them that I will be giving away. The rest I will be keeping and putting up in my house, including the awesome book set. So I highly recommend all of the maps, including the book sets. I've got to get my hands on them and physically look at them all in person. They're all gorgeous. I will pick a lucky person. The most efficient way for you to contact me is through my Instagram at BillyGalenko_wine_nerd, Billy Galenko wine nerd. And just send me a message saying you're interested in the maps, and you will be entered to win. And then I will select somebody who reaches out. I have a range of maps that are available. So once you reach out and let me know you're interested, we can discuss what you might want. I have a Spain map, an Italy map, a France map, and there's a few Champagne maps that are basically spotlights of different regions, like the Côte de Blanc, for example. So let me know if you're interested and you will be entered to win. But before we get to Steve's interview, I have a couple pieces of wine news that I would like to cover. The first has to do with a wine region that I enjoy a lot, that I think this is actually really important news, and it's interesting for our generation. And it is that the Canary Islands have detected Phylloxera for the first time. Now, for those of you who don't know, Phylloxera is a root louse, which means a very small bug. It doesn't only live in the roots, it can also live in the leaves. But in the 1860s, it swept from the United States into Europe and basically killed most of the grapevines that were living in Europe at the time. It was a very big deal. Some people thought it might be the end of wine as we know it. The solution to that was to graft European grapevines onto American roots and then replant them. That basically solved the issue, gave grapevines a lot of protection against Phylloxera. It's still a little bit of a problem, but really only for vines that are planted on their own roots, that aren't planted onto this American rootstock. The Canary Islands, as you guys all may know, far off the coast of the Iberian Peninsula, they're volcanic islands. And typically when you have sandy volcanic soils, Phylloxera just doesn't survive, doesn't thrive, isn't a problem. So all of the grapevines planted on the Canary Islands are on their own roots because they didn't need to have rootstocks. Just recently, Amanda Barnes, master of wine now, who is a past guest of ours right before she passed her MW, wrote a really interesting article on this whole topic called Phylloxera Detected in the Canary Islands. She gives us great detail and kind of talks about the implications of what it could mean for some of these centuries-old vines. So it's sad. I hope they're able to control it and figure it out. But this is one of the few times we're seeing Phylloxera make it to a region that is completely unheard of. So everybody keep tabs on that. And in the meantime, buy the Canary Island wines that you can. There's some really great volcanic wines. Big fan of Canary Island wines overall. Next, speaking of a region that I just like their wines, and I didn't really know much about them until I stumbled upon them years ago, was Austrian Sauvignon Blanc. Now, everybody thinks of Sauvignon Blanc maybe coming from New Zealand, the Loire Valley, or maybe the United States. It's obviously grown all over the world. But one place people don't think of it too much is Austria. When you think of Austrian white wines, a lot of people's minds go rightfully so to Gruner Veltliner, and then maybe secondarily over to Riesling. And then there's a handful of grapes that maybe would catch your eye. But Sauvignon Blanc is most likely not one of them. it really is sitting at only 3.9% of the total plantings in Austria. But I think it's really interesting in terms of a variety because it's always very crisp, very lean, and it comes from this region in the south. I always get my directions mixed up, but southeastern corner of Austria, closer to Slovenia, called Steiermark, or also known as Styria. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but it's really cool, interesting region, continental climate that also has some of this warming factor from the Pannonian Plain that flows in from Hungary. I recommend people go check out these Austrian Sauvignon Blancs. I know that was really high level. This article on the drinks business is much more in depth. It is called Austria Carves Out Winning Niche in Crowded Sauvignon Blanc Market. I will share a link to them in the show notes. But I just want people to be open-minded to where their Sauvignon Blanc comes from and seek some of these out. There's a really unique kind of minerality or something to the Austrian Sauvignon Blancs that I just really enjoy. So highly recommend checking that out. And for now, we will get over to our interview with Steve DeLong. Now, like I mentioned, Steve started out in architecture and then transitioned over to map making and was able to make wine map making kind of his a full-time job and passion. So I highly recommend everybody go check out his website. We get into a lot of fun conversations. He's really an artist at heart, and he really shares the passion project that he was able to make into a living here. But you can see all the thought and care that goes into every single map. He's so detailed. He shared with me a couple of the spreadsheets and things that he uses to provide that extra little bit of detail on all of the maps, whether it be production volumes or the key varieties in each region. He is so detailed and the maps are amazing. So I will let him share more about them. It's a really interesting interview. You just work through basically the mind of an artist. And yeah, I think that's all I'm going to be able to add for Steve's interview. I had a great time chatting with him. And again, if you're interested in potentially winning one of his maps, shoot me a note at Billy Galenko Wine Nerd on Instagram, and you will be entered to win. But now, without further ado, here is wine cartographer Steve DeLong. Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Billy.
Yeah, I'm really excited. As I mentioned offline, I grew up very much a geography nerd and absolutely love maps. So when Charles told us about your work, I realized I had seen it around in different places. So I'm really happy to find the source and learn more about these amazing works of art. So could you tell us a little bit about maybe your background and kind of how you got into the space you're working in now? And then we'll dive into a little bit more of the nuances of what you're working on.
Well, I was trained as an architect, and I still work in architecture on some projects, but getting into the wine world is like, I grew up in Oregon, so wine was around. It's like, I wasn't in the wine industry or anything, but we used to go to vineyards when I was younger, when I was 21 and over, actually. So it's like, and it just was something I was always into. And then when I moved to New York in the 90s, and still I was like sort of the dark ages of wine for me because I was like into like heavy Shirazes and things like that. And then there was a huge national wine movement there, which was incredible. And so that really sort of piqued my interest, and lived close to Chamber Street Wines, which was an incredible shop and still is. And met my, to-be wife, Deborah, and we both were into it and just, continued on that trajectory.
I've seen, and like I guess I want to draw the parallel between your architecture past work and the detail and stuff in the maps right now. I've seen all these photos randomly online over the years of like people drafting things by hand for architecture work, contracting work back in, the 80s, 70s. Was it still very much a hand-drawn, heavily graphic field at that time, or had you guys moved on to using more computer things? And how did that kind of inform your approach to some of the work that you've done with the maps and charts?
Yeah, when I I'm 60 years old. I started, my first desk had an ashtray on it, and it was the hand drawing thing is pretty wild. And that was in the 80s, and everything was hand drawn. There was CAD, but not enough people used it. But in the 90s, everyone went to CAD. So I learned the software, you had to learn lots of the graphic programs too, like Illustrator and stuff like that. And I mean, maps are just giant floor plans. So it's kind of an easy transition. I mean, there's lots of different things in terms of maps, like map projections and things like that, which are important and different than architecture.
Yeah. But you're still, I still find it fascinating because you still have to find and create all of these levels of detail, but then they have to also, work within the larger whole as well, which I think is you do really well in your work. Can you talk a little bit about, so you started in architecture, you met your wife, you guys grew to like wine. What led you first made the wine varietal chart and then you moved into maps. What kind of started this progression? Like what tipped you over the edge?
Well, this actually was Deborah's idea, was to do the wine table. So like she said, I want to do a periodic table of wine grapes and grape varieties, and said, okay. And so she said like, oh, I got to show you this. Went to this bar that had a giant periodic table. He says, you got to go here. And it was, you got to drink free the entire night if they had your name on the board. And they had, more odd names. And the day that I went there, it was Steve. I thought that was like, wow. But we didn't end up drinking. We only had a few beers and left, but I could have drank all night. But it was funny. I still have I have this. We got a free cup that I use for my patrons. I still have it here. And then we started doing these tastings, and we had in our apartment, we just wrote out names of different grape varieties not post-it notes, but index cards that were red and yellow, and just put them on the wall. And we were going to go for a periodic table, but we realized that it's not really a periodic table, because there are lots of things that are like periodic tables, but you can't really, it's kind of fitting a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't quite lend itself to that. And so you have to make too many compromises. So we just came up with a table and recognized it by weight and acidity. And our first one was actually much smaller, and it was foldable on plastic paper and stuff like that. And we had a lot of errors on it too. So we worked for another year, and actually a year and a half to make what you see now. And we've been wanting to do a update on that. I'll make an exhaustive update. And we actually have something which has twice as many grapes. That has 144, and we would have 365 was the idea. So you'd have a grape for every day. But because there really are about 800 grape varieties in the world that are planted and used. But so to have half as many, because people always say like, why don't you have this grape? And it's like, well, I can't have every one. It is a little bit difficult.
Yeah, for sure. So when you first started doing this, were you working in tandem with quote unquote like wine experts? I know you work like with Charles Curtis now. Like how, if not, did you find it hard to like sell these in to people who are, thought they knew a lot about wine and were like, what were these, architects selling me a wine chart for?
Well, you do this when we talk to people like Randall Graham was a big supporter of this early on,
cool.
Which was really nice. And he helped us and did a lot of just free editing, which was crazy. And the thing about it, there's science and there's not science in this. It's almost like there's like sociology, because you have perceptions of what's a heavier grape variety and what's not a heavier grape variety. And some grapes are made in a variety of different styles that are both light and heavy, like Semillon. In Australia, you'd think it'd be super heavy, but in Hunter Valley, it's super light. So you have to like sort of take a balance. And so it was a lot about reading things and asking people, talking to different people. Mostly, yeah. We're talking to wine experts, but in the way it's like, so you have funny things in the wine world. So like, I think of things like the Jose, I hardly even pronounce his name, but he's a really nice guy. And it's like, in the wine grapes book, you have like probably 10 different varieties of Trebbiano and distinct varieties, but Pinot Noir Pinot is one variety. So Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, these are all one variety. And Pinot Gris, everything. It's like, how could that be? They're so different. And just because genetically they are, so the science says there's just one variety called Pinot, and they're just variations. No, they're not variations. They're whatever. The world's not going to change. The world's not going to say, oh, it's all Pinot. It's all one thing. It's like, oh, Pinot Blanc and Pinot Noir. It's like, no, it's like, it's the same thing. Who cares? No, everyone cares. And it is a, contingency that people recognize. And so you go with that. And so the grape variety table is very similar in that sense, that it's based on things like that, like expectations and contingencies of what people think of a different grape variety.
Right. It has to be, I tend to go down and look at resources that become so esoteric, like only people like me who really want to get in the weeds, it's helpful for. Otherwise, like to your point, like people need to be able to use this in an everyday setting, and they can't have a huge like branch chart about the history of Pinot genealogy to understand like how these mutations came about.
You can actually get that. Jose did the one in the wine grape table, an incredible genetic chart, but it is obscure.
Yeah. Well, I love that book. I have it. But yeah, no, that table is so big, it folds out of the book. Like he couldn't even like fit it on regular pages.
Right.
I do encourage anybody who wants to learn more about it. We've had Jose on the podcast before, so big fan of his as well. He is really nice. So how did you transition from a wine chart or a varietal chart, which is fairly straightforward, to something as complex as mapping? And did you start with like a region you knew, like the Pacific Northwest, or like how did you navigate into that space?
It was just looking at things, looking at the different wine maps, and things like the World Atlas of Wine, and saying like, oh, I wish it was better. I just wish it was easier to read and better and clearer and I said, let's try it. Let's do one. And Spain was the first one. So Spain and Portugal was the Iberian Peninsula. And I had friends, Ryan and Gabriella Opaz, they helped me with this because it was like, okay, I could just do this one because I know them and they're really embedded in the Iberian Peninsula. So it's like, and geographically it looks good. So it's like, okay, this is going to be the first one. And it was good because Spain is fairly straightforward. Portugal as well. They don't have a lot of overlapping regions. I mean, they have the Cava thing is kind of strange because it overlays a lot of Spain, but overall they don't. And so that's very, very cut and dry. And I think it's good to start with something that's easier, because then we went to California, which is also very straightforward because the AVA laws are very, very cut and dry. And then Italy was unbelievably difficult. And Italy is the absolute most difficult country by miles. So there's so many overlapping regions, and trying to make it look good is difficult. So I'm still not completely happy with what we have, and still always trying to do better. And I don't think anyone really has done Italy very well, just because of the overlaying different regions, especially in Piemonte. So
yeah, on the Italy part, I noticed you have like the traditional one with the DOCs and where I guess all of the space is DOC, DOCGs, but then you also have an IGT map. Did you do that so that you could give people a separate idea of like, if you could look at both? Because I think that would make a lot of sense. I was like, oh, that's so smart, because, obviously, I write it, Sassicaia is technically in Tuscany, but, I guess it is its own DOC now, but still, how did you decide to do that?
To do the IGT map, it's just like, well, it's a separate one. because it just would be way too complicated. I mean, it's already too complicated with just the DOCs, DOCGs. And so just because it's very difficult to do all the overlays. So in the end, the way to do this is to do a digital map that you can turn off and overlay and do all that sort of thing. But that's hopefully in the future, but it just has to be done. So
yeah. So when you create one of these maps, do you get how do you like share it? Like when you're done, you're like, I'm done. Do you like go to the I don't know, like some Italian trade board and show them? And then are people ever like, oh, you missed this, and this? Like, I know everybody's obviously going to have like input, and to me they look brilliant. So like, how do you incorporate feedback? Or like, I'm sure you can't please everyone all the time with all these little details.
Well, I mean, there's no real mistakes. The only mistake would be a spelling error, but it's like that doesn't really happen anymore. That happened earlier on, but because they all come from wine laws, and I've seen other people's maps, and I don't know really where they come from, but if you use the official documentation, like the Italians do it very similarly to the Americans, and it is just a long. It's like a survey, like in terms of a legal survey of a property, where it says like, this, you go this way, he pointed here, you go to this barn, you go up this road, you go to this, and it's like, some of them are unbelievably complicated and in Italian, which it has to be translated, and you have to use the right maps to survey it, but that's all done.
So if anybody had any issues with you, it wouldn't be like, don't argue with me. Like, I was using this resource. Like, I'm not like making this.
That's what you can though. Yeah. I mean, I could seen other maps and I could see like, well, why would they do that? Because it obviously is wrong, but some errors just exist and then they get, duplicated by other people. And then that kind of thing happens. There's lots of, I mean, there was an error in the World Atlas of Wine that came from translating Burton Anderson's Italian map, but you couldn't really tell the difference between the outlines of the regions and the roads. So it was really difficult to even do it. So somebody had taken a road and and you could see that was wrong. And they got rid of that, of course, long ago, but still you can see how these sort of things happen. It's probably like AI. It's like AI that has lots of mistakes right now because there are lots of mistakes out there, and they just reports on them. So,
when you were deciding on your style and the colors, was there any other map that you looked to for inspiration, or any sort of art inspiration?
Yeah, there's like looking at the old sort of French highway maps, and that was sort of the original thing. And so we used a lot of icons, like for mountains and things like that, and that's what I like to move away from. And because for Spain, it's fine. But then you get to a very mountainous place and it's just a bunch of mountain icons everywhere. So it's not that great. So, and that was when I started going to the newer style of map, which has been stalled a little bit by other work that I've been doing. So, which uses hill shading versus the old using mountain icons, which I think is a much better way to go. It's like there were beautiful maps of Louis Lermont, who did the original Champagne maps, which the old ones are incredible. And the early ones had hachée mountains, which is very difficult to do, and it has to be hand-drawn. And he moved away from that in his later works. He started using contour lines and things like that to show maps and hill shading. So that kind of map is probably never going to be done again, but they were beautiful. But the contemporary of his was Edward Imhoff, who did these incredible maps of the Alps. And that's the kind of, it's like, if they're incredible. I mean, he probably wouldn't be as good of a cartographer. He was from Nebraska or something, but he's like, the Alps are picturesque and beautiful, and it's all hill shading. So that's what we're going to now. It's like doing everything hill shading and working right now on an atlas of the world. So like changing every one of our maps to and the much more, just a better style, much more legible, better. Because I still think no one's really doing a great job on wine maps.
Yeah, no, I agree. And especially over the past year, I've started teaching like some WSET classes, and we use like a mishmash of maps in the presentation. And it's just like, why can't there be a clear, concise, easily understandable map? So I'm looking forward to your atlas. Can you talk about the different types of maps that you offer on your site right now? I was trying to wrap my mind around it. So you have like posters, you have kind of like canvas and like art form, and you also have like the bookshelf maps. What are the difference between all of them, the formats?
Well, the regular ones are printed by standard lithography, printed on a paper and for your wall. That's it, and hang up somewhere. And that was and we've done 12 of those, and that's pretty much covers most of the world. Not all of the world. Doesn't cover Canada or China or places like that. But and those will come. But and that was the original style with the icons. Then we went to the idea was during COVID go to the Sauvignon 1 style, and because I thought, okay, this is a totally different, just cut from the old one and use hill shading. And actually, the hill shading in them was from old CIA maps that just sort of like we were pencil drawn, and we sort of like made it so it doesn't look pencil drawn anymore, but they were pencil drawn hill shading. And so that, okay, that looks a little bit better, but still and they're much more concise. Those three maps of France, Spain, and Italy take away the really, really obscure regions that most people don't really care about, or they're not really planted that much. And there's statistics that you can see which ones are almost irrelevant, and just kind of chop out those ones. And so we have those two maps that are wall maps, so you can get them regular, like lithographic, or you can get them as an art print that's printed in the glickly sort of pigmented ink on art paper, which are it just looks better, and they're just more expensive. But if you're going to put it in an expensive frame, you might as well just get the more expensive print. So it's funny that way, because it's like, how do you monetize this? Like it's kind of a housewares business in that sense. And that was the bookshelf maps was the idea to make them much more accessible for most people.
So were you able to, when you started doing the wine maps, did it take off right away? Did you stop doing architecture very quickly after? Are you still doing architecture? Like how did this evolve, and did it become your full-time thing right away?
Well, we moved from New York City to London, and the idea was either we're going to move because we had a baby, and we weren't going to raise him in New York City. It was just too difficult. So we said, okay, we're going to either go to the West Coast where I'm from, or go to the UK. And I'm very happy we went to the UK. And so I just started working full time on the maps and everything. That's pretty much the evolution.
Nice. Well, I mean, if you have to start doing wine, being in the epicenter of the wine trade is probably the best place to be. Is your wife?
She's British. Yeah.
Oh,
so
like, it's an interesting, it's either the West Coast or London.
Right. Well, because she's British. That's a detail that, is important.
Nice. So as you've continued doing all of these maps, I also want to talk about the wine tasting tools and guides, so we can go whichever way you want. But I wanted to ask, a question I had here was like, has your understanding or perspective of the world of wine changed as you've done this charting? Are you into different regions? Do you have a different appreciation for certain places that you might not have otherwise?
It's funny that way. It's like the world of wine has become so big. It was actually in the 90s. It was pretty small, and part of our so the first grape chart we did was in 2002, and we started a thing called the Wine Century Club. So it was for people that had tasted 100 grapes, and it's still around. And if you've tried 100 grape varieties or more, you can be a member of the Wine Century Club. And at that time, very few people could get 100. And it's like, now it's not that difficult. So it's like, just in terms of that idea of a variety and discovery and like new regions and indigenous varieties, it's like, that's just commonplace now. And it's great. And so I really enjoy that. The funny thing is, I think I'm starting to become an old man because I really do like Burgundy and Champagne. So it's like, and that's like, oh God, that's like maybe it's a London thing. It's like, oh, that's what gentlemen drink. It's like, okay.
Oh, I think they always say, and I mean, even I've seen it in my own wine studies, all roads kind of end at either Burgundy or Champagne, or even people in Bordeaux, like they transition over. Well, so on that side, you also created these wine tasting notebooks and guides. Were those just something that you created for your own use and you were like, this is really helpful, and your friends were asking you to create for them? Or like how did those come about? Because they look really, and how did you decide what was in there? I guess what to include in the tasting empty pages?
Well, it started as something for me and Deborah, like what we want, like how we always recorded wines, and if someone came to you, like, just say like, what do you do? What do you ask for? And there are lots of different formats and ways to evaluate wine. And back when we were doing this, it was funny because like you still had people, I don't know if you still do, but you had people with the old Davis. So it's like the Maynard Amarine 20-point assessment of wine, which was, it was all about faults. And it's about like, is the wine cloudy or brilliant or clear? And it's like, and you assign a certain amount of points for that, and different, like, is it vinegary, and like things like that. It's like, I don't think anyone uses that anymore, but there was still sort of an influence of that type of assessment of wine at the time. And then there was the INAO, the French versions, which they had sort of abbreviated ones. WSET has their own. They still have their own. You have the INAO has like a 2-page assessment for a single wine, which is a little bit too technical and difficult for your average person. And no real wine professionals use that for comparative tastings. It would just take too long. A winemaker might use that type of assessment. But so this was like, it was just like looking at different ones and like what would really, really work, and what just encapsulates a wine in a very brief way. And so it was sort of a hybrid of all the different available, wine tasting, note formats, sort of the ones that you can sort of like not completely check off boxes, but it more towards that.
Yeah. Could you maybe describe, because you also have like a little, looks like a fold out as well with some information for people to reference. Can you just describe like a little bit about what, if somebody were to buy the notebook, what they could find inside?
So I think that was the thing I was most proud of, is like that it was a kind of thing, it has, like the wine wheel. Mm-hmm. So it was a Noble's wine wheel. And now I think lots of other people have copied it now. But I was thinking like, okay, so I always thought that was a little bit misleading in the sense that it's almost like an optical thing, and taste is much different. Your taste buds aren't on spectrums and wavelengths. They're actually blocks of different things that perceive smells in your nose. Maybe there might be like 10,000 different smells you can perceive, and in combination, it makes it like, by billions. But so I wanted to do something like that, but in like a blocky way, and just sort of like how you smell it. So that was this sort of thing, and then have an instruction on how to actually do it, in the sort of the length of it would take if you were like the instructions to a board game. Like if you're like, how do you play Yahtzee? And you can kind of learn how to play Yahtzee by reading the rules, in a very short period of time. So this is kind of like that. I mean, wine is difficult. So it's like you can make it a little easier, and give some instructions so you get on the right path. But people like it because it's difficult. That's one of the great things. If it was super simple, I don't think that many people would be so interested in it. But it's a way to sort of organize your thoughts and get on the right path in terms of wine tasting.
Yeah, I think I can't remember who it was on the podcast, but referred to kind of like the mystery of wine, or sometimes when you're searching to better understand, it's almost like a treasure hunt where you feel accomplished when you can put a couple of these findings or discoveries together for yourself. But I think it's amazing. Yeah, I was looking at just kind of zooming in on the different sections you had there, and I think it was really, really well placed. I think you found this and I don't know if you did this on purpose, but it seems to be like a middle ground between the most, like I was saying earlier, really complex wine nerdy side of things, and maybe something like, this is an example, like a wine folly or something that like really tries to simplify things for folks. I think you found like a really, really great middle ground for people to kind of take that next step and understand wine, but still make it relatively approachable. Was that a kind of a thought in your mind as you were going for?
The idea was like, I wish somebody had something like this when I started out. It would have just made it easier. And instead of having to read a ton of books, and like a lot of people say like, okay, this is like, okay, you want to learn about wine? It's like, here's a stack of books. It's like, oh, I guess I won't learn about wine. Forget it,
Yeah, exactly. That's yeah, like I think about it too. Like I got into wine. I didn't work in wine either. I worked in like digital advertising, and I got that stack of books and just started reading. But like it took me, I'm still going. It's taken me 7-8 years now, and a lot to go.
Yeah, but that's it. That's why it's good.
Yeah, well, that's why I think the beauty of, and Charles was going on about this, and we had him on the podcast too. And I think that's where the more you learn about wine, the more you don't know. When it comes to tasting, I think there is something helpful like that can really jumpstart and allow you to be more curious about the different aspects of things. And I think maps really help you take that level deeper. So I think it is cool. And I think even just like your IGT map next to like the Italy map or some of the broader French maps, it's interesting to get the regions, but being able to zoom in, it's almost like you can continue your own wine studies through looking closer at a map. Do you feel like that's a apt analogy, or is that crazy?
Well, that's crazy. No, that's the thing. I totally agree. It's like I think the amazing thing about wine is it's like you get a bottle of wine from somewhere in the world, and it's like a little time capsule, and of that place, and of that time, and it's like, and then you could go, you go like, where is that from? And you naturally go to a map to see where it is, and I think that is always fascinating about wine, and it's unique. I mean, in terms of any sort of experience that way, you can't experience music that way, or different other things that way, or other food stuff. Maybe some salamis or something.
And cheese, you have your cheese thing.
Yeah, cheese is different. But cheese is a little bit different because it's not encapsulating a certain year or something. It's a little bit different. And perhaps it's pasteurized and stuff like that too, or most likely it's pasteurized. So
one thing I think about maps that are so fascinating, and my listeners here might get a little off on this rhapsodically talking about maps, but the other part is like whenever you see a wine on a wine list, every region is listed like the same, and maybe people know more, regions like Napa Valley. To them, it's probably this like huge place, and I think it really brings it into context when you can see how small some of these regions actually are, and like it makes it just feel so much more special that a wine is coming from that little place rather than this like giant thing. Because some people might just see the word Chile next to the word like, I don't know, like for not just San Gimignano or something, and like it only comes from the village of San Gimignano.
Yeah,
it's just, I think that's fascinating with the map, and you can't get anywhere else. So looking forward as the wine world is continuing to change, you said you like natural wine. Are you thinking about like, I don't know, like a skin not that all skin contacts are natural wine, but maybe like a skin contact specific map and just highlighting regions around the world that are doing that? Are you trying to do anything more avant-garde, or is it more just refining and honing in these maps that you've already kind of done and making them even better?
Yeah, it's refining. Doing the one great thing about doing these Champagne regions was being able to work on maps that were much more large scale, which means zoomed in, and because you had so much data that you couldn't use, because you have to generalize maps when you're doing it for a whole country, and that you can. Sometimes there's too much generalization that you have to do, and so you don't see the individual plots and things like that. So I like doing that sort of thing. That's pretty incredible. And we're actually working on another project in Rioja for Telmo Rodriguez and Alan Quintada, that it has La Bastida, which is their area, and it's I'm working on it right now. And it's the craziest thing is that it's a bunch of vineyards that are digitized off of Google Maps. And so to digitize the map, I mean, Google just gets the stuff from the different space agencies and the European, NASA, and the Japanese. And we finished the digitization, and the next day they released another map. And it actually is pretty amazing. So it's a kind of nightmarish in terms of work, because I didn't anticipate that. But so much had changed, and they had increased their plantings in 5 years. And most regions have started to dig up, in those 5 years. So it's like pretty interesting. And
yeah, can you talk a little bit more about? So that's in Rioja, which is very cool. I think that's a region that I know they're working on. We had Peter Argis, he works for the DOC. Oh, wow. I can't even remember. He works for the Concila. Oh my gosh, I'll get it. Anyway, he works for the regulatory body for Rioja. I can never say the name properly. But what was interesting there is for years, they've kind of made these, almost to use a Bordeaux term, like Grand Vins, these beautiful blends. And now they're really highlighting more some of these single plots, whether they're bottled on their own or they're not. I think it's a right place to better understand in a mapping sense. Like, unlike somewhere like Barolo or Burgundy, I think there are some of these special areas that need to be honed in on and zoomed in on a little bit more. Is that kind of what the focus similarly in this new project for Telmo is?
Yeah,
or?
Because it's like it is like the world's going that way, especially the fine wine world, because you want it. If it's special, it's from a particular place, and it's very much like Champagne's that way. Champagne and Rioja are similar that way, because they're about the overall wine is about, and the overall regulation is about the method, and where Champagne is about the method and the dosage and all of that stuff, and then you have the Rioja is about the aging and the oaking and all of that stuff, and where the plots just sort of get lost, and so it becomes something that could be really good, could be not good, and you don't really know. You just have to kind of trust the best producers and things like that. And there are a few people who have been doing single plot wines, like Telmo Rodriguez, and they want to make that explicit and show off their region, and it's pretty cool. So
nice.
I think the world's going to right now.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And I see Champagne too. I see even some people saying, like, is it getting too much in the specialized side? But I think there's like room to better understand all these individual plots, and even when they're made into blends, like there's still components that go in to add different essences or flavors each year. So
that's
I don't think it's ever going to stop.
Yeah, you can't be too much one way on this, because it's just like grape varieties. It's like in California, it's like, oh, only single varietal wines, or that's it. That's good. It's not. Blends aren't any good. It's like, what? We've been blending forever. It's like, no, it's just ridiculous. That was a 90s sort of idea, 80s and 90s idea. And that's gone away. Just like, so a single plot, it has to be a single plot. No, it's like, it could be lots of different plots. And Champagne could be from different vintages as well. So,
yeah. But understanding what each of those plots brings, I think Mascarello, he still has his Barolo that he makes from all over, but they highlight each of the, individual crews that go into there because each brings its own character. I think, yeah, exactly right on. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Steve. This has been really insightful. As soon as I get a bigger apartment, I'm definitely buying more of your work. I probably will buy a smaller one in the meantime to put up next to those old champagne map that I have on my wall. So, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. That was our interview with Steve DeLong. I hope everybody learned a bunch about wine maps. I hope everybody goes and checks out delongwine.com and searches out some of his maps. I love them. I think they're great. And even if you don't have space in your house for a poster size thing, he also has different size maps and some that also fit in a little bookshelf mold. So definitely check out all the sizes. Check out your favorite region, and you will not be sorry. Maybe gift it to your wine lover in your life or for yourself. But for now, that is our episode for this week. We will be back with a 5 questions on Friday and another full episode next week. Cheers.